Committee on this Friday, ending our first week of live session here at the Capitol. It's wonderful to see you all this morning. I know we have a lot of big bills and a lot of public testimony. This is a crammed session, as I think most of you know in this room. And so I will control public testimony and I'll ask how many people intend to participate. And I will time your testimony accordingly as a result of how many bills we need to get through, particularly today. There's only one more week left of this session, which means we only have really 3 more committee days after today to get through all the remaining bills. So I hope you understand and recognize of the importance of allowing all these bills to be heard. So look forward to hearing your testimony, but also be mindful that there are many other people who would like to testify. So that will do roll call.
Senator, excuse me, Senator Cooper.
Here.
Senator French.
Here.
Senator Cole.
Here.
Senator Cost.
Here.
And Chairman Nethercott.
Here. All right, with that, we will do this easy little 17-page bill. I see Senator Steinmetz here. Senator Steinmetz, welcome. Do you want to walk us through Senate File 100, Internet Freedom Prohibiting Discrimination? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I appreciate your time today. I will be brief. I gave you a handout. I think you'd have to be hiding under a rock to not understand what this bill addresses today. And so I'll just briefly take you through the bill. If you go on, we start out with the findings. We don't always do that, but we thought it was important to include in this bill. That takes you through page 2. On page 3, we're just creating a new title under Trade and Commerce and creating a new subsection in the Consumer Protection. Then we go into definitions, which of note would be on page 4, a free speech state. We're defining what a free speech state is. And also on line 13, interactive computer service. And so that would give you the definition there. And I'm not reading those. I can if you would like, but I want to be sensitive to your time and the rest of your bills. Going on to page 6, this is the prohibition from censorship. And it takes care of sharing and receiving both. And it does that for the interactive computer service and your ability to share and receive. But then on line 19 through 23, also it takes into consideration your geographic location. Going on to page 7, that is your applicability. And it applies to functionally to on line 11, 12, and 13, functionally has more than 20 million active users with any 30-day period. And then B, you can see 150 million. And that is just because that is a larger group. It's more like a public utility at that point when it's a larger organization like that. On to page 8, it includes in this state in B, subsection 3, or any other free speech state, or D, any other state or territory of the United States. There are some exclusions at the bottom of the page there and going on to page 9. And so that's your exclusions there. And obviously when it's engaged on line 13 and 14 on 9, when it's engaged primarily in its own expression, is an exclusion. So then down to the bottom of page 9, that gets into your remedies. And so it's allowing to people to bring a civil action in a court of the state. And they can, on page 10, the court may grant declaratory or injunctive relief and treble damages, or at the user's election, $50,000. They shall also award costs and reasonable attorney fees to the prevailing user. And then there's also a section for those who might aid or abet in a violation. On to page 11, you have a right to a jury trial. And then there is a provision for contempt of court. And there is a provision on the bottom of page 11 in F, that any loss or release or distribution by an interactive computer service or of identifiable or private information that and their intent to cause reckless loss or release or distribution of the computer service or identifiable private information, the court shall award to a person whose information is lost, released, or distributed as damages, treble damages, or $1 million, whichever is greater. So that's a pretty big provision in the bill. Then basically the same thing I went through applies to social media platforms there on page 12. It's conforming language to, it just applies it to social media platforms. That will take you through page, the rest of the bill, and then you go to page 18, and that is your severability clause. And so that's pretty much the bill. And I would stand for any questions. And I also see that the good attorney Philip Hamburger is with us today, and he has helped craft this legislation. He's done the bulk of the work on it, so he can explain things much better than I. And I appreciate him being with us today. So,
Mr. Hamburger, thank you, Senator Steinmetz. Questions for Senator Steinmetz before we turn to Mr. Hamburger? And I think they're kind of intending to present this bill together as a,
Yes.
as a team. And so if there's any quick questions for Senator Steinmetz, we'll go to Mr. Hamburger, or Professor Hamburger, I think it might be. Professor, welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning. Feel free to introduce yourself to the committee and share with us your thoughts on the bill.
Thank you. That's most kind. It's an honor to be here, even if electronically only. So I teach at Columbia Law School. I'm also president of the New Civil Liberties Alliance, which defends civil liberties from the administrative state. But I'm here in my individual capacity, and nothing I say should be attributed to either organization. The goal of this bill is simply to address the censorship that's become all too common. I think the chief concerns about any such bill would be that it collides with Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, or perhaps even with the First Amendment. So if you want, I can say a few words about why that's not a problem. Would that be useful or not?
Professor, I do think that would be useful at this time. I anticipate hearing a series of comments from internet providers claiming unconstitutionality. At least we're receiving slews of emails from across the country.
Right. So fortunately, the Supreme Court has already helped us on this. There's a case called Red Line Broadcasting from 1969. It came in the wake of about 100 years of regulating communicative technology. So telegraph, telephone, radio, television, all were treated in one way or another as common carriers. And in Red Lion, the Supreme Court says there's no sanctuary in the First Amendment for unlimited private censorship operating in a medium not open to all. And it also quotes another case, Associated Press versus United States from 1945. Freedom of the press from government interference on the First Amendment does not sanction repression of that freedom by private interests. And so what we have here are companies that are functioning as conduits, not merely an expression of their own views. And as conduits, they're like common carriers, a public forum. And it therefore is perfectly within American traditions under the Constitution to regulate them to prevent discrimination. And discrimination is what's at stake here. The bill could have been much more severe, but that's not the goal of the bill. For example, it could have treated them as genuinely as common carriers, in which case they cannot say no to anybody. The bill doesn't do that. It's actually quite mild compared to what it might have done. And to reinforce the degree to which it does not collide with the First Amendment, it focuses only on the very largest of companies, the ones that have a dominant position in the marketplace. It takes 20 million users as the measure of that. Just for example, Parler had only 15 million active users. And in case a court finds that an insufficiently high number, it falls back to 150 million users, which certainly would satisfy any constitutional concerns. So I think the constitutional concerns are out of place. The companies have free speech when they're outside their role as conduits, but as conduits, they're perfectly subject to regulation.
Thank you, Professor. Senator Steinmetz, any final thoughts?
no, Madam Chairman, I would love to defer the rest of my time to those who wish to comment.
Wonderful. Questions for Professor Hamburger or Senator Steinmetz? All right, thank you. Those in the waiting room, if you could, online on Zoom, if you could raise your hands right now so I can see how many of you intend to testify on this bill. If you're thinking about it, I still want you to raise your hand. And I need you to do it right now. And if you are in the room and you intend to testify on this bill, or if you're even thinking about it, if you could please raise your hand. You're not thinking about it in the corner? Both of them? Okay. I see 6 folks wanting to testify on this bill. I'm hoping to get this bill out by about 8:45, 8:50. Just want everyone to be mindful of those timeframes. I know there's a number of you in the room who represent these industries. And so be cautious. If you didn't raise your hand now, you may not be heard later. So I just want that to be noted in order to manage all of this. So we'll start with those remote. Mr. Szabo, welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee. I know we've heard from you in the past. I recall you providing previous testimony on previous bills before the Wyoming legislature, also accusing them of being unconstitutional. So curious to hear your thoughts as to why this one is as well. So welcome, Mr. Szabo. Introduce yourself, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Carl Szabo. I am Vice President and General Counsel of NetChoice. I'm also an adjunct professor at the George Mason Antonin Scalia Law School. NetChoice is on the board of ALEC, and I am co-chair of the Communications and Technology Task Force at ALEC. So I do need to address some inconsistencies in Mr. Hamburger's interpretation of the First Amendment. Red line broadcasting is actually narrowly tailored to only apply to broadcast. The rationale there is there's a limited amount of spectrum, and the court kind of had to do some deep analysis in red line to make clear that First Amendment limitations imposed by the Federal Communications Commission in this case were only limited to broadcast television. That's why the FCC actually has no jurisdiction over cable communications, conduits. Second, with respect to they are a public forum, in fact, a FedSoc judge, Brian Walsh, recently declared when PragerU brought a suit against YouTube that Google is not a public forum. So the notion that just saying they are makes them so isn't the case. There's a litany of other First Amendment problems with this bill and other constitutional problems, but more importantly is at the heart of this bill, what it is and what it will cause. So what it is government intervention with private contracts. And as a conservative and a member of ALEC and an active Republican, that I take issue with. This is basically private businesses this is government telling private businesses what type of content they can and cannot decide is best for their users. Second, what it does is it will result in the inability of these platforms to remove really dangerous content. So an example would be ISIS recruitment. So if ISIS put out a statement of, come join us and improve America, and a platform remove that, well, that would be a censorship under this bill, and that's the type of content that would be removed. Second would be, imagine one of your church's YouTube pages. If an atheist went out and started putting really hateful comments and stuff like that on there, this would prohibit a platform from removing those types of hateful comments about your church on the YouTube page. Let's use another example. Let's use the Tide Pod challenge, where kids were convincing each other to eat Tide Pods, which are used for laundry detergent. This would prohibit the ability to remove that type of content. So censorship is very interesting because it's very broad. The First Amendment protects a hell of a lot of speech and content that we do not want. Pornography, ISIS content, terrorist content, hate speech, incitement to violence is exceptionally narrowly tailored and is rarely applicable when it comes to the First Amendment. It's an exceptionally high bar to clear. So there's a lot of content out there that would be mandatorily required for these platforms to be kept up. And lastly, as a conservative, I never liked the idea of statutory damages. This will create an incredible cottage industry of plaintiffs' attorneys who will basically just try to certify classes and bring lawsuits at $50,000 per violation, which is quite a number against these platforms. So there's a reason why there are 4 different ALEC resolutions and policies opposed to this type of legislation. It's because it's government interference with private businesses. And if we as conservatives believe in decisions like Hobby Lobby and Masterpiece Cakes, which recognize the rights of private businesses to do what's best for their users and their customers, then this bill is certainly not the way from a conservative perspective, and is certainly not the way from a constitutional perspective. And I welcome to answer any questions and any other concerns that the committee may have.
Thank you, Mr. Szabo. Any questions for Mr. Szabo? Senator Cooper.
Mr. Szabo, appreciate your testimony here today. Would you go so far as to say that these companies have not stepped over the bounds on censorship in the last few weeks?
Madam Chair, Senator Connor, what's been going on troubles me. It does. It worries me as a conservative. And I've written prolifically about this in the Daily Caller and elsewhere. But by the same token, if I want to uphold my conservative principles of limited government and free enterprise, it's very hard for me to say that when a private business decides to not host my speech because, for example, it's not what their users want, or it's not what their advertisers want, then I, as a conservative, it's very hard for me to go in there and say, well, it's not fair. Because at that point, am I really conservative anymore, or am I just somebody who wants the rules to always fall in my favor? Second is, and look, I'm also very concerned about what's going on, but this legislation, for example, 15 million users, Parler is bigger than 15 million users. And it's a great outlet for conservatives. So that was the private sector rising up to create an alternative. You have Gab, you have many other platforms out there where conservatives can meet, speak, and get together. Now, to the extent that our content and comments are being so controversial or so insightful in a negative way that they have to be removed, I think that could be seen as one of the reasons why conservatives and Republicans lost a lot of votes in historically Republican suburban districts. Maybe that's a way for us to better realize, well, when we're on Facebook or Twitter, maybe we should limit our comments to less insightful speech and save the more robust discussions for other services like Parler. Because at the end of the day, if all we do is sit around and talk about how we become the victims, then we're not going to be able to turn that around into victory when it comes time for the next election.
Thank you, Mr. Szabo. Any final questions for Mr. Szabo? Senator Kolb, we do have about 8 more people to testify.
Quickly, this is about censorship. I find it odd that I hear you stating conservative values when I can tell you there are very large internet providers that have censored people for what I consider just political reasons. And whatever we can do in a way to limit that is a good thing. So I don't accept the argument that this somehow it makes a conservative speech, less able to be spoken. So I do take issue with that. But thank you for your comment. I appreciate hearing it.
Madam Chair, may I make a quick response?
No, thank you, Mr.
Okay.
Szabo. I appreciate it. We just have to get through.
No worries.
Ms. Feliciano, welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee. Ms. Feliciano, if you would introduce yourself to the committee, who you're with, and share with us your brief comments.
Good morning, Chair Nethercutt and members of the committee. My name is Rose Feliciano. I'm the Northwest Director of State Government Affairs for Internet Association. Internet Association represents over 40 of the world's leading internet companies. I will say batting after Mr. Szabo is very difficult. He is a very compelling testifier. I just want to make a few comments about why IA opposes SF 100. IA believes that SF 100 will put Wyoming consumers at risk for impeding internet companies' moderation of harmful content by exposing companies to litigation every time they remove or restrict content. While we share the author's interest in promoting diverse online discourse, SF 100 would do the opposite and exacerbate challenges associated with content moderation. Wyoming's consumers would be less protected from issues coming up online, such as promoting eating disorders self-harm or cyberbullying, and any other types of content that IA members would work vigorously to identify and remove under the protections of CDA 230. Congress enacted CDA 230 to encourage companies to moderate harmful content, and it clearly preempts states' bills which are inconsistent with its protections. The bill itself acknowledges this preemption by providing that the bill does not override federal immunity, such as they conveyed by Section 230. Even with that provision, the bill's substantive requirements are clearly inconsistent with 230 by seeking to impose new limitations and new liability on content moderations. Perhaps more importantly, the bill also seeks to prevent a private company from exercising its constitutional right to refuse content from its platform under the Wyoming state constitution and the US Constitution. For those reasons, IA urges you not to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Feliciano. Any questions for Ms. Feliciano? All right, seeing none,
Thank you.
I'm going to go to members in the room who wish to speak on this bill. Provide some balance. I think everyone remote is speaking against the bill. I think there's some in the room that want to speak in support. I think it's helpful to hear those.
Madam Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I live here in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I think everyone in the room recognizes that there has been substantial discrimination by a variety of internet and other providers, tech providers over the last year especially, and I think we've all got some very serious concerns about that discrimination. One of the ways I think that you need to look at this is that in this country, we do allow monopolies under certain circumstances, but those monopolies are generally heavily regulated. And the example that I would use is electric providers, whether it is, and they're regulated by the PSC, or gas providers, and they're regulated by the PSC. And one of the primary ways in which they're regulated is that they're not allowed to discriminate. They can't discriminate on the basis of whether you're a conservative or you're a liberal or anything else. If they have a service area, they have to serve everybody in that community. And in relation to that, when we're dealing with monopolies, if we're not going to regulate them and look at them in that context, then we have to look at them from the antitrust standpoint. And right now, what we're dealing with in this country is we're dealing with some extremely big monopolies. And we know that they're monopolies because we know what they were able to do last fall in terms of being able to, for example, ban the New York Post from even being able to present information to the public about some information that was incredibly important to the presidential election. So we're dealing with a group of organizations who have found a way to discriminate on the basis of viewpoint and then hide behind the First Amendment in doing that. I urge you to pass this bill. I think it's important for Wyoming. I think it's important for us to be a leader on this issue. I think it's actually important for the First Amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hageman. Questions for Ms. Hageman? Ms. Hageman, so just a piece here. I mean, the issue is this law would prevent private business from making its own decisions of who it wants to have as a customer. Is that right?
That isn't the way that I read the bill.
Okay. But you believe that these companies should be treated like a utility?
I do. I think that they've taken on that role. I think that in terms of whether it is Wyoming or another state, we're going to have to find a way that these companies are not able to discriminate based upon viewpoint, because that is what we're seeing.
But this bill does not make them a utility, correct?
It does not.
It simply creates a private right of action.
That's correct.
Thank you. All right, with that, we're going to go to Ms. Kersel. Ms. Kersel, welcome. You're on mute. If you would introduce yourself to the committee and share with us your thoughts.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Samantha Kerschel, and I am the Executive Director for TechNet in the Northwest region. We are a national bipartisan network of technology companies that promote the growth of the innovation economy nationwide. I am testifying today in respectful opposition to Senate File 100, which we believe will subject Wyoming residents to more abhorrent and illegal content on the internet by forcing private internet, communications, and social media companies to keep objectionable material on their platforms. You have already heard many of the reasons we are opposing the bill, but I do want to just highlight a few things. First and foremost, our members are committed to keeping their users safe online. Our companies understand that they have an obligation to remove objectionable content. Otherwise, their users will be subjected to dangers like images of child endangerment, financial scams, spam, and other nefarious links. This is an important responsibility they do take seriously, doing their best to remove harmful content while keeping their services open to a broad range of ideas. This is not an uncommon practice. If an individual were yelling profane remarks or inciting hostility in a restaurant, the restaurant has a right to remove someone from their establishment for acting in an obscene manner. As you heard earlier from my colleague at NetChoice, we do believe this bill violates Section 230 of the Federal Communications Decency Act, which grants companies the right to be able to draw lines and respond to market forces like brand safety and consumer expectations. Even if there were a constitutional way for states to act in this area, there is no way under this bill to prevent bad actors and opportunistic class action lawyers from abusing the process and punishing companies for keeping bad content off their servers. Given the sheer volume of content, hundreds of millions of posts per day ensures that both artificial intelligence and human reviewers at companies cannot get it right 100% of the time. Billions of transactions, after all, will inevitably lead to errors. It would be fundamentally unfair to implement a civil cause of action for instances where code misfired or a simple mistake was made. For these reasons, TechNet opposes SF 100 and strongly encourages a no vote. Thank you so much for your consideration, and thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Kerschel. Any questions for Ms. Kerschel? Senator Cooper.
Thank you, ma'am, for testifying. You talked about objectionable content. Objectionable to whom?
Ms. Kerschel.
Madam Chair and Senator Cooper, thank you for that question. You know, people a lot more technologically savvy than me have created code and are working on algorithms that highlight different keywords, for example, and I can get you a better answer probably on what those are, but I think that there are some nefarious things that we can all agree upon that are objectionable, and you've heard about them. You know, if you're logging on to a social media platform, there's an expectation that you're not going to see certain images, and you know, whether that's pornography or child endangerment or even relentless spam that comes across your screen. So I think that is a conversation that, you know, the platforms themselves are having, and that might differ from platform to platform, but there are things that this bill would allow that I think are universally agreed upon.
Any follow-up? All right, thank you, Ms. Kerschel. Mr. Winnie, if you'd like to come forward, please. Mr. Winnie, if you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
My name is Bill Winnie. I'm from Sublette County. Speaking for myself, I find that the discussion that's going on with how we respond to the woke generation who say things like, how could you possibly let them say that on your website or whatever? I find that curious. And you talk about the Communications Decency Act. One of the underlying themes of that act, as I see it, is competition. So if one company does something that's objectionable, other companies perhaps would not. But what we face is a world where there's very little competition in some places. And that's the crux of what you're trying to get to when you have objectionable behavior. And I would offer that you might consider some application of the common carrier concept, railroads, trucking, et cetera, where only the most egregious of things meeting current legal standards of objectionable stuff would they be held accountable for. Subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions for Mr. Winnie? Appreciate hearing from you. With that, we'll go to Ms. Zerga. Ms. Zerga, welcome to the committee. If you'd start your video and introduce yourself and who you represent.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Liz Zerga. I represent the Wyoming Telecommunications Association. The Wyoming Telecommunications Association represents rural providers in Wyoming. We are both telecommunications providers and internet service providers. And you would think from the discussion of this bill that this bill doesn't reach out and grab us. But that, I would say, is a question. Having looked through the bill, one of the things that's important, of course, is definitions. And this bill uses a lot of terms that are not defined. You heard a discussion, and I've heard conflicting testimony at this point about the bill. There are some carve-outs in this bill. One of the carve-outs is that in some of the definitions, it does not apply to internet service provider. And we certainly are internet service providers. But we also provide other services associated with internet service provider. Internet service provider is not defined in this bill, so it's unclear. There's also a carve out in this bill, and it is definitely intended to reduce the scope of bill to those who have a large number of users, but user is not defined in this bill. And it certainly, if it were customers, we wouldn't be captured in this bill. I don't think the intent of the bill is to reach out and grab us, but if users is defined as perhaps anybody who sends or receives an email or a message, we transport those as ISPs. We also transport those when we're dealing with setting up an intranet for a series of businesses in Wyoming. So I have concerns about the scope and the breadth and the intent of the bill as it relates to those items. I also understand, of course, the ISP's argument at the national level regarding whether or not this violates Section 230. But I'm not going to opine on that. There are people who deal with that all the time. My concern is very broad bill, very broad definitions in some instances, lack of definitions in other areas. So I perceive this bill as needing some more work. I don't think you intended to grab us. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for Ms. Zerga? Ms. Zerga, you are a lawyer. And do you believe that the bill violates Section 230?
I do.
Thank you. All right. Any further public comment in the room? Please come forward. Welcome, and if you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Cameron Schulte. I'm the Director of Government Relations at the Heartland Institute. For those who aren't familiar, the Heartland Institute is a free market think tank, national free market think tank. We've been looking at this issue. I submitted my testimony to members of the committee last evening, so I won't belabor those points. But to Senator Cooper's concerns earlier about free market concerns, clearly we're a free market organization. We've looked at this and we've deliberated in our own minds about this issue. And the fact that Section 230 exists in federal law is prima facie evidence that we're not dealing in a free market. With that point, Section 230 explicitly states that social media providers or websites can ban obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable. Yesterday, we woke up to find out that Dr. Seuss is now otherwise objectionable. And I did not want to come up here and talk about Dr. Seuss and cancel culture, but that it is emblematic of what this bill is trying to ensure is that Wyomingites and roughly 250,000 social media users have that ability and that capacity to share their thoughts. And those thoughts under this bill and in Section 230 are explicitly to protect religious and political speech. It is not to allow ISIS recruitment. It is not to allow child pornography or any other worst case scenario we can dream up in our minds. It is narrowly tailored. With that, I won't take up much more time. We have a busy day, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions? No, thank you. Just a quick question.
Yes, Madam
There's kind
Chairwoman.
of this duality occurring, and I certainly understand the challenge associated with cancel culture and the challenges associated with that, but isn't that a form of free speech as well?
Yes, yes, it is. And the exact response to offensive speech is more of it.
The more speech, the better. Senator Cost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll ask you the question, but it might go to the bringer of the bill as well. How does this fit with our schools and the internet usage and the hopefully taming of what they're going to be getting involved with?
Mr. Schulte?
Madam Chairwoman, Senator Cost, I'm not sure as a legal question, I'm equipped to answer that question as a non-attorney. But I think the point you are making is how do we ensure that children, school-age children, are protected and not bullied and otherwise. And those are protections that are already codified in Section 230. And this bill under Section 230 slots nicely into the state exemptions that exist in the federal law for you to actually engage on this issue.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Any additional public comment in the room? Speak now. All right, seeing none. Senator Steinmetz, any final thoughts from you?
I just thank you, committee, for taking up this bill today and for your time. I just want to say that we're doing this on behalf of our citizens and the folks here in Wyoming. And if Ms. Zerga has some thoughts on as to how we might alleviate some of her concerns, I'd be glad to work with her on an amendment if that would help out. So thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator. All right, Professor Hamburger, I see your hand is still raised. Briefly, because you are the co-team with Senator Steinmetz. Final last comments and very brief.
May I? I just want to clarify some questions that were raised that I think misread the statute and the First Amendment. First, I think Mr. Szabo's comments misreads Red Lion and the First Amendment. The reliance here is not on the narrow holding of Red Lion, but the reasoning that underlies it, which is strong and shows the consistency of the statute with the First Amendment. Second, I think some of the comments misread the statute, which is a pity. The statute very carefully permits websites to take down anything on any ground they want. It also permits even the large tech companies to restrict content, including all the bad content one fears. There's no aim in the statute to do anything to create a wave of filth going across the country. On the contrary, the statute carefully permits all sorts of careful moderation of content, just not viewpoint. So if you're worried about porn, ISIS, violence, don't worry about the statute. It's a distraction. And then third and finally, I just want to point out there's no conflict here with Section 230 whatsoever. I have a Wall Street Journal article on this I can share with anyone who's interested. Section 230 bars content, concerns content discrimination, not viewpoint discrimination. Moreover, it only protects the companies from damages and liability, not from liability and causes of action. And so I think it's a gross misreading of 230 to suggest that it actually bars this statute. 230, if anything, is constitutionally vulnerable because it privatizes censorship. And that, I think, we'll see develop in the courts. So this statute is designed to stand up in federal courts, not to run up against anything a court would do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Hamburger. Appreciate you being here. Any final questions? All right. Public comment is closed. Committee, back to you. Moved by Senator Cost, seconded by Senator Kolb. Amendments on the bill. discussion on the bill? Senator Cooper.
Very briefly, I think this this bill is before us today because of the obvious abuses and misuses of the ability to censor by the large carriers out there. It's unfortunate it had to come to this, but that's where we're at. Perhaps it needs a little work, some amendments. I'm not sure what they are yet, but I think this is too important to let it die in committee. I think it's time to move forward with it. Thank you.
Further speeches from the committee? Senator French, let's hear your speech on the bill.
Madam Chair, here's my speech. I strongly support this bill. I think it allows the citizens a level playing field for their thoughts, whether it's political or religious or whatever it is. You know, it levels the field on these big monopolies. There's my speech.
Excellent. Resounding applause from the committee. Senator Kolb, we're ready.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Woke algorithms. That's what I'll call this. People talk about an autonomous thing out there that somebody created. They don't know what it's doing. Well, they do know what it's doing. And it's quelched free speech. It's hurt people. It's discriminated. And I think something has to be done about it. And I strongly support this bill as written. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Senator Cost, have you prepared yours?
Actually, I'm going to try a different approach. I would appreciate it if you would work with Ms. Zerga and maybe see if an amendment for the protection there. I think that's necessary. Other than that, I think the bill's fine.
Well, thank you. I'm a no vote on the bill, primarily as a result of seeing maybe perhaps a bigger picture concern. I think if we want to make social media utilities, then we need to have that conversation and approach it that way through regulation. But as a business owner myself, I am concerned about losing the ability to make decisions for my own business in a way that I think is best. And I also am concerned about the inability of consumers to make their own choices for what platforms they choose to be a part of and which they don't. No one is required to be a part of a platform or partake with a private business. And so I do think that we're invading into that space. As much as I recognize the frustration and the challenge and the need to do something, the broader implications are real. And I think that requires a really 30,000 foot level and a recognition that sometimes we don't like how free we can be in the United States, and there are consequences to that. But I support those freedoms and I support those liberties for private corporations, even sometimes no matter how big they might get. So I'm a no vote on the bill, but I certainly understand the need to bring it. And so good work, Senator Steinmetz. With that, we'll do a roll call vote on the bill.
Senator Cooper.
Aye.
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Cost.
Aye for now.
And Chairman Nethercott.
No.
Madam Chairman, Senate File 100 passes with 4 ayes and 1 no.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Steinmetz. All right, with that, we will start our morning of Friday fun with firearms. Senate File 67, repeal gun-free zones and preemption amendments. I see the good majority floor leader Driscoll has joined us. Welcome, Majority Floor Leader. We certainly are familiar with this bill. I've seen it every year since I've been in the Senate. Look forward to hearing why you're bringing it again this year.
Madam Chairman, thank you. You run a great meeting. As normally you finished within 15 seconds of your slotted time on the last one. We're done with the First Amendment this morning. We're on to the Second Amendment. I don't know where you're going after me, but I hope you treat me as good as the First Amendment. So this is an old friend. This bill's one that's been back multiple times. And as we all know, often the reason for that, they're not understood. And they're a good reason. They come back for repeated times. So the gun-free zones and preemption amendments is another step of the state of Wyoming following through on the promise of the Second Amendment. And this opens the door a little bit back to what the Constitution told us we could do. And so when you take a look at it, and I'm going to go quickly through it, I think you're all familiar with it, so we're not going to go wildly, but it's, and I don't usually do it this way, but I'm going to do it page at a time because I think it's going to make the questions easier for everybody. I usually just explain a bill and get fired on. Page 1 basically is just the title on it and runs through it. And the title's kind of interesting. It's Repeal Gun-Free Zones Act. And it really repeals gun-free zones in relation to concealed carry. And you'll see that as you go into the bill. Page 2. Yeah.
Majority Floor Leader, let's explain that a little bit more for the public. What is the applicability as it relates to concealed carry?
As you get into the bill, you'll see that's the sections of laws it deals with. It really does not deal. And Senator Cost is going to question me on this, but I'm reading the statutes and I'm going to allow you as a lawyer, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. As you go into it, it deals specifically with concealed carry sections of the statutes. I brought them with me so we can read them and go through them. So when you look at it, you start with Little Romanet A, should be known and may be cited as the Repeal Gun-Free Zones Act. That really doesn't do anything other than give it a title. That's really what it is. So when you go to section B, and it says persons lawfully carrying concealed weapons in Wyoming under Wyoming Statute 68104, little I through IV may carry a concealed weapon in the following places. Any meeting or governmental entity, any meeting of the legislature or committee thereof, persons lawfully carrying concealed weapons in Wyoming under Wyoming Statute 68104, which when you go to 68104, back to the public end, we're dealing with, I'm not good with the statute.
Majority Floor Leader, for clarification, does your bill only apply to those who possess a concealed carry permit?
That's the way I'm reading it, and I've been told otherwise, but as I read the statutes and as you track it in, and I'm going to ask you to back me if I'm wrong, I'm fine. Either way, it's fine, but this way I'm reading it, it tracks.
And that is your intention?
It is my intention at this point.
And so Majority Floor Leader, so what you're asking this bill to do, what you're intending for this bill to do is that for persons who have concealed carry permits, there is no such thing as a gun-free zone.
Correct.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm.
And can you walk us through what are the requirements to receive a concealed carry permit?
So if we go back into the 6 areas of the law, let me do that because it's cited. 68104. Okay, and we can read through it pretty rapidly, but it's a concealed carry. It's about a 5-6 pages in the book, and basically says you've got to go through fingerprinting, a fairly strenuous set of rules to be able to.
What statute is that?
It is 68104, wearing or carrying concealed weapons, penalties, exemptions, and permits.
And so a person with a concealed carry permit has to be 21?
I believe it, yeah, 21 years of age, does not suffer from physical infirmity, prevents safe handling of firearm, is not ineligible to possess a firearm, has not been committed to a state or federal facility for a year, has not been convicted of a felony, misdemeanor violations of controlled substances. So it's going to enter into some of that, demonstrates familiarity. It goes on, and it's very extensive. It's pretty restrictive. And that's part of why I lay the way I do is, let's be really honest, this bill's letting people carry guns in some pretty interesting places. I know of I don't know of any instances that we've had problems with people misusing firearms to have concealed carry permits. They're fingerprinted, they're extensively vetted, and they're the kind of people that I trust to have one. For example, sitting in this meeting, I have no problems with people that have been thoroughly vetted sitting here with a firearm. In fact, it would make me feel more comfortable. One of the examples I use, my daughter's a school teacher. She had multiple death threats by students, was not able to have anything to defend herself when someone says, I'm bringing a gun and going to shoot you. To me, these are instances, they make sense. And it's not law enforcement, but it's people that have been thoroughly vetted to have and carry firearms. So that into it, and we go into it, and we'll talk whether that's what it really does. So we go into it, lawfully carrying them, meeting the legislature, carry them in it, and it goes to schools, college, university, professional athletic event, except as provided in 21(3)(132). And that's the section of the law that allows schools to actually have some variation on what they do. So that they're not going to be able to mess with the concealed end of it, but they still have the ability, in my opinion, reading through this.
So Majority Floor Leader, is this the legislation that the legislature has passed in the last few years, allowing for the schools to make their own decisions regarding firearms in their facilities?
In my opinion, is they still have the ability to regulate within reason, but not with the concealed.
Can you speak at all to how this applies to the federal law associated with gun-free zones?
I will apply it as best I'm mentally able to, and I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a law-abiding citizen, and we all know that federal law preempts whatever I want to put in the green books. We have to follow federal law. So should I have written something into this bill that's in violation of federal law, I think it's a pretty tough road. It's probably going to get beat up.
Senator Cost, on this topic?
Yes. On your statute 68104, have you read J? Okay.
Knew you were going to trap me.
That's the sheriff's provision that they have discretion, which I think is notable, that we've just determined that we can't give them the discretion for fingerprinting fees. But I think we digress, Majority Floor Leader. So if you want to go back to schools.
Well, and I think that's what Senator Cost asked me on, and I'm not finding Jay. Okay, it is Sheriff. You're aware of it, obviously. The really interesting part is if you read this bill, it doesn't strike that section of law, folks. It's still there. And that's the way I read it when I did it, is I wasn't going to spend a lot of time testifying that way, but it really does not strike out big sections of what's there. So we've left a lot of latitude there for them to be able to do it, while at the same time saying you're not going to restrict the people that have gone through the process to be a concealed carry. And that's my intent. So it goes through the legislature, it goes to elementary, college, or university. I will tell you the same thing. UW has visited with me, and they may testify today. They've got problems with open carry. And this law, in my opinion, doesn't change them regulating how that falls. We've got a court case on it, but that doesn't fall within the purview of this bill. This bill talks about concealed carry. And so at any rate, you go through it, and then we go into at the top of page 3, it says nothing is construed to, and it says, I, as carrying a concealed weapon where otherwise prohibited under Wyoming statute 68104, just what we just said. It leaves that section of the law in that says it does not do it. 2, prohibit a school district from regulating possession of firearms by employees of the school district on school property. So it still allows that school to tell my daughter she can't bring a gun or do whatever, because it leaves them with their employees just like any other employer relationship. 3, prohibit private property owner from restricting firearms, leaves it wide open on them. They can do anything they want. And then we move into section 2, which is 68104. Once again, the concealed carry one is the intro. 68401C 403 amended to read wearing or carrying concealed weapons, penalties, exceptions, permits. Once again, doesn't deal with open carry. This is concealed carry section of the law. And it adds a new section T, or a piece to it, says exceptions provided 68105. No person is authorized to carry a concealed weapon pursuant to paragraphs A, double I through IV of the section shall carry a concealed firearm into the, and that leaves some of the carve outs that are in law. And I didn't enumerate those. We can get into them if someone wants to, but it leaves the carve outs in place. And I'm thinking courtrooms, jails, we've got some in there. And once again, I didn't mess with any of that. That still stands.
Majority Floor Leader, what do you think about adding something to that, such as emergency rooms of hospitals?
I have visited with part of the hospital people. Interestingly enough, I've been hit both sides of it. Part of the hospital people, I'm told, actually already violate the law and carry firearms themselves because of what's going on.
Majority Floor Leader, there's no law prohibiting that. That's a local policy, right, of the hospital?
Policy of the hospital. And ironically, the hospital here in your town, or at least in Casper, is now a private one. And so it doesn't fall under this law at all. They can do anything they want. Our publicly funded hospitals will fall under this law. And I have told them I welcome an amendment if they want to try to exempt it. I'm not going to do it. I've been told by some of them is, look, I've told them they can turn their gun collectors on if they want. You walk into the MRI and it's going to pull the gun off your hip and take it away from you. So that's long and short. My belief is concealed carry holders tend to be people that are knowledgeable about firearms, where they can have them and not have them, and you're not going to see them abuse or do them the wrong place. I believe in trusted people that are thoroughly vetted, and these are. So then we go into the next part, and this is the preemption part, the last piece of the bill, which starts on top of page 4. And really what it does, just goes into it, and it adds in on line 8. And what it says is regulation is preempted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming, which says that basically this section of the law takes away, and this is probably the part that's most controversial, law, takes away the ability of cities, towns, counties, and government agencies to tell you you can't conceal the carry. You're going to be able to pack your firearms by direction of the legislature only.
Majority Floor Leader, is this really necessary? Because as we know, state law trumps municipal ordinance, right?
It does. But I don't think it's harmful either. It does. And this, basically what this does, it just says, look, city, you're not going to ban firearms at a city council meeting by a concealed carry person. You don't have the ability to do it. If you think it's a problem, come back and amend the statutes. Once again, we get into home rule stuff, and this is difficult. We talked about it the other day in committee, and it does step over the top of it. But I think it's really important that the state has consistent gun laws. They're a big thing, and the penalties tend to be big on guns. And so when you can do it in one place and not do it in another, it really goes against what ought to happen on something of this level of importance. And with that, that's the whole law. That's it. The preemption page is just that. It's a policy decision. You folks sitting there are going to be the judge on the deal and the jury. It's a policy decision of whether we take that ability and put it back to the legislature, which I truly believe that. You read the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and this really what this whole bill does is tracks a little closer to following the U.S. Constitution, literally. With that, I'd stand for questions, which I think we've done some.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a few things. I think.
Questions for the Majority Floor Leader?
Yeah, I was gonna. Thank you. It's true that no one forces anyone to conceal carry. Even if this bill was to become law, you're not forced to carry if you don't want to.
Yes, sir. Madam Chairman, sorry.
And also the chief law enforcement officer, and it's debatable if it's the county or the city, if you apply for a concealed carry permit, has to sign off on that applicant.
Madam Chairman.
Well, it's true because I got one of these and I had to go through it. So I pretty well remember the process. And then concealed carry on Board of County Commissioner meetings. This would allow that then.
Madam Chairman, Senator Cole, absolutely.
And there's an issue with that because I was a county commissioner and we didn't have law enforcement there all the time. And it was always an issue and a contentious issue came up that we had to call law enforcement down, and sometimes they weren't there, and you just never know when they're going to come through the door. So I think that sounds like a good thing to me as being a prior county commissioner. And that ends my comments, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Senator Kolb, I see you're a co-sponsor and Majority Floor Leader Driscoll. Can you tell me if there is a penalty for violating the concealed carry permit law?
Madam Chairman.
Senator Kolb, Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairman, best of my knowledge, I'm unaware, other than you probably lose your permit is my guess, but we could go read that section.
Yeah, if you lack compliance with the things you had to comply with when you applied, then you lose said permit. They will revoke it. I mean, that is my current understanding. I could read the back of my card or statute. Thank you.
What statute is referenced there?
It is not referenced.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator, can you speak to page 4, line 10, where it says no state agency or entity? Should that be expanded to include no federal agency, state agency, or entity?
Madam Chairman, Senator Cooper, I believe that goes back to the question Madam Chairman asked me is, I don't believe the state has the authority to tell the federal government anything in any type of federal facility. So post offices, your local farm service agency, all the we have no ability to tell them anything.
Follow up, Senator Cooper.
I'm probably headed, thank you, Madam Chairman. Probably headed more towards the Fed's ability to tell us what we can do outside of a federal agency, outside of a federal facility, if you will. For example, here, should they be restricted from preempting this law in this building, the Feds?
Majority Floor Leader.
Senator Cooper, absolutely. Federal law trumps state law. Happens all the time. We do repealers almost every year down here that a federal law has changed state law, and we come in and rip a section out of our books, maybe willingly, maybe unwillingly, but we follow federal law.
And would that be because of the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution, Majority Floor Leader?
Madam Chairman, we're getting into an area that's way, way over my head. You know, I understand the Constitution and the way I read it, but my interpretations of different sections against them, you just did Zoom with people that make their living and doing those interpretations. I'm not the right one to ask on it. I'm sorry.
All right, any final questions for the Majority Floor Leader before we go to public comment? All right, raise your hand in the room if you're interested in providing public comment on the bill. Raise them high. Got in the glass, I have double hands. Okay, so about 5 of you. And then online in the waiting room, if you would raise your hands and if you could do that right now. All right, we will start in the order of which I am receiving them. We'll start online and we'll do a couple there. Keep your hands raised. It helps me manage the meeting if I know who is interested in speaking. It doesn't mean you have to, but it is important for me to know expectations. All right, we're going to start with Ms. Prax. Ms. Prax, would like to ask everyone to keep their comments to just a few minutes. I'm not going to limit to a particular time, but I will cut you off just to ensure that we are allowing everyone to provide feedback on this bill. Welcome, Ms. Prax. If you would introduce yourself and who you represent and share your thoughts on the bill.
Hi, thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee for giving me this opportunity to speak. My name is Liz Prax. I've lived in Jackson for 22 years. My husband is a big game hunter and a precision long-range shooting competitor. We have a lot of guns in our house, everything from a 9mm handgun to my husband's AR-15 competition rifle. We support common sense laws like background checks for all gun sales and red flag laws to temporarily prohibit people who pose a danger to themselves or others from possessing guns. We strongly oppose the bills you're considering today, SF 67, 155, and 137. When I was growing up, 2 teenage boys very close to my family were killed by gun violence. One shot himself with his father's gun. The other was shot in a stupid argument over a pen in a donut shop. I now have a teenage son of my own, and I can't imagine how those boys' families survived the pain of those tragedies. When considering gun laws, the words you should keep foremost in your minds are evidence-based. There's a lot of evidence proving that states with stronger gun laws have lower suicide rates and lower homicide rates. We know that access to a firearm triples the risk of death by suicide and doubles the risk of death by homicide. We know that 90% of suicide attempts with a gun are fatal, compared to only 4% of attempts not involving a gun. And Wyoming has the highest gun suicide rate in the country. Studies show that the best way to protect children in schools is with threat assessment and safe storage programs. 91% of mass school shooters are current or former students. 74% of school shooters under the age of 18 acquired the firearm from the home of a parent or a close relative. In 93% of school shooting cases, there were known behavioral warning signs that might have been acted on to prevent the shooting. As the Department of Homeland Security reported in 2018, preventing violence by detecting and addressing these behavioral red flags is more effective than any physical security measure. Law enforcement officials agreed that armed civilians interfere with their ability to stop active shooters. As former Dallas Police Chief David Brown said, "We don't know who the good guy is versus who the bad guy is if everyone starts shooting." The fact that most civilians have far less weapons training than police officers average 168 hours increases the risk of accidental shootings. 21% of gunfire incidents reported in schools over the last 7 years were unintentional. Allowing guns in more public places increases the risk of them falling into the hands of people who might harm themselves or others. As the saying goes, guns are a long-term solution to a short-term problem. I know personally just how true that is. For the safety of our children and our community, please oppose these 3 bills. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prax. Appreciate you appearing today and taking time out of your schedule, participating in the legislative process. We really value your feedback. Questions for Ms. Prax? All right, seeing none. We'll go to Ms. Howland. Ms. Howland, if you would start your video and turn your audio and introduce yourself to the committee.
Hello, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Shay Hallen, and I have been a Laramie resident for 20 years and would like to express my strong opposition to this bill. Currently in Wyoming, concealed carry permit owners and holders, are prohibited from carrying in K-12 schools, as well as college or university facilities, unless they are otherwise authorized to do so. These are common sense safety provisions to help keep our community safe. I've served on a public board for 5 years in Laramie. My children attend ACSD public schools, and my son plays sports at public facilities in our town. I serve on these boards with my neighbors, my friends are teachers, and my husband coaches the local hockey team. In all these situations, confrontations occur regularly, and I worry how these confrontations might turn out if guns were present. I feel strongly that it's not necessary, prudent, or safe to allow loaded handguns in places such as schools and other public locations. I and my family will not feel safe, and I do worry for Wyomingites all over the state when misunderstandings and disagreements among us can now become deadly if loaded guns are present because of this bill. So I encourage you to vote no on this dangerous legislation and reject Senate File 67 in order to keep us all safe, keep Wyomingites safe. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Ms. Helen. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us and your concerns and your participation in the community and supporting hockey. So thank you. Any questions for Ms. Helen? All right. With that, we'll move to Ms. Howard, Beth Howard. And then we'll go to members live in the audience for a minute. Ms. Howard, welcome. If you would start your camera.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify. I am Beth Howard, a longtime resident of Cheyenne, a mother and a grandmother, and I'm here to voice my concern for their safety and the safety of children and young adults in Wyoming. I'm testifying today as the volunteer chapter leader of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and I am speaking in opposition to Senate File 67. This dangerous bill will force guns into our K-12 schools and onto our university and community college campuses. The bill is offered as a solution to prevent gun violence, but the reality is that the increased presence of guns introduces new risks and does nothing to intervene before shootings happen. Law enforcement officers receive an average of 840 hours of basic training, including 168 hours of training on weapons, self-defense, and the use of force. Under this bill, people with little safety training will be able to carry concealed guns into campus facilities and K-12 schools. I also have a concern that since Wyoming allows concealed carry without a permit, how we will ever know who has one and who doesn't. Research strongly supports the idea that if guns are carried into schools, children are more likely to access those guns. Across the country, there have been numerous incidents where guns that were brought into schools were misplaced, stolen, or accessed by children. Laws and policies that force colleges to allow guns on campus are likely to lead to more shootings, homicides, and suicides, but are unlikely to prevent mass shootings. Wyoming, as has been cited, already ranks #1 in the country for suicide by gun. It is a devastatingly sad fact, and we can do better. There are many ways to protect students from violence, but this bill is not one of them. I urge you to vote no on Senate File 67. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Questions for Ms. Howard? All right, seeing none, I am going to start timing the testimony. And sometimes when we're jammed for time as well, I just want you to know what we'll have to do is just raise hands if you're for or against. And I don't want to do that because I think it's really important that we hear your comments, but I am going to have to start reducing time based on the amount of interest on the bill and the number of people who intend to testify. I'm going to limit your testimony to about 3 to 4 minutes, and then I'll just cut you off. All right, so that's how that's going to look, but we do really want to hear your feedback, and we think it's important to the process. So with that, or anyone in the room would like to come forward? Welcome, Representative Newsom.
I'm rising in support of Senate File 67. Former legislation with repealing gun-free zones gave me pause because it didn't clearly delineate who would be carrying those weapons. The rigor of going through and getting a concealed carry permit, I think, takes away that concern that people will just, do the Wild West thing and draw. I think people that go through the rigor of getting a concealed carry permit are ready to be careful and only use their weapon when necessary. And generally it's not. The other thing that also gave me pause in prior legislation was our schools that have teachers that carry concealed carry 21-3132. And our school district is one of the few Park 6 that allows for our teachers to have concealed carry. And so denoting that in this bill, it carves out those schools that have teachers that have concealed carry, because concerns that have been brought is in our schools, the teachers and the staff have guns. Everybody else that has a gun is a bad guy, is considered a bad guy. So that this carves out those schools was critical to me supporting this bill. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Questions for the representative? Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
All right, with that, we will go to Ms. Visser, who is online. Ms. Visser, if you would start your video.
Hello, Madam Chairman and Senators of the Judiciary Committee. I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today about my views on Senate File 67. My name is Michelle Visser and I live in Laramie. I've lived here for over 25 years. I'm the mother of 2 sons that attend Laramie High School. I'm an educator at the University of Wyoming at the Art Museum, and I'm also a student at the University of Wyoming. And last, my family also owns guns, and yet I am still opposed to Senate File 67, the repeal of gun-free zones, because I fear this act of providing for the carry of concealed weapons on school campuses, community college campuses, and the University of Wyoming will result in significant unintentional injury, death, and death by suicide. And I do think it warrants to be reminded that in the state of Wyoming, you can conceal carry without a permit. Therefore, there is no necessary training that you would have in order to carry that weapon. According to the Everytown for Gun Safety website, there were 45 incidences of death or injury in 2020 due to guns on school grounds. Nearly once a week, children were vulnerable to someone's intention to cause harm or mishandle a weapon because there are laws that allow guns on campuses within our country. In Texas, there was a student that unintentionally discharged his firearm in his dorm room. And university professors have accidentally shot themselves while carrying weapons on campus. In 2019, roughly 1/3 of the emerging adults coming to Laramie and other college campuses across our country reported getting drunk at least once every 2 weeks. Can you imagine the traumatic consequences if the University of Wyoming students age 21 and older were allowed to carry guns with them while drinking? If Senate File 67 were to pass, my 2 high school age children have indicated they would choose a university outside the state of Wyoming where they could avoid the possible traumatic circumstances of a dorm mate that has a gun with them.
Running short on time.
There's also evidence that faculty members express discontent and will leave their positions at the university in order to feel more safe on college campuses. There are also fiscal considerations.
Ms. Visser, you hit your 3-minute mark. We
Okay.
appreciate hearing from you. I apologize. There's just a lot of other people who want to participate this morning. So thank you so much. Questions for Ms. Visser? Seeing none, we appreciate hearing from you, Ms. Visser, and sorry for the shortened testimony.
Thank you for
With
your
that,
time.
we'll go to Mr. Devine.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much for the time to testify today. Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Dr. Darren Devine. I'm the president of Casper College. I speak to you today also as the president of the presidents of the 7 Wyoming community colleges. I promise I will make my comments very brief. While we're respectful of Second Amendment rights and issues, and we are certainly respectful of the good intentions of the bill's originator. We do have concerns and believe that local control, which is able to balance individual rights and local safety issues, is preferable in this particular case. In short, I believe the college presidents and the colleges maintain an honest and respectful disagreement on this bill concerning the wisdom of maintaining gun-free zones. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. Appreciate hearing from you and having that perspective from the community college presidents. Questions to the community college presidents? So the message is mixed. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I think, that's correct. This is a very complex issue, but I can assure you that my colleagues and I have talked about this, as you noted earlier, every year ever since I've been in Wyoming. The one thing everyone agrees upon, I can say easily, is local control. Leaving local control of this issue is preferable.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. President. All right. With that, members in the room, yeah, come on forward if you can. Whoever wants to come up first. All right. Welcome. If you would introduce yourself to the committee and explain your position on the bill. I do have a timer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Mary Lynn Shikich, and I'm a third-generation Casper native. I'm here today representing the Banner Health Hospitals in Wyoming. That includes Community Hospital in Torrington, which is private and owned by Banner Health, Platte County, which is a county memorial hospital, and Washakie, which is a county memorial hospital, and Wyoming Medical Center as of October 1st, as the sponsor of this bill, my kind friend indicated, became a private nonprofit when Banner Health purchased them. However, the issue for us is not just the county memorial hospitals, it's all hospitals in the state. And specific to that, we'd like to ask for your consideration, unlike other states who did not adopt exemptions of hospitals, for your kind consideration of emergency rooms in particular. So I know I have to be very quick. I'd like to go into more detail, but specifically how that could be implemented is in ERs in the throughout the country in emergency rooms. They do have metal detectors, and they also have safe. So if anybody comes in through the visitor entrance or comes into the emergency room not needing to go by ambulance, they come through the metal detector. Similarly, when the ambulance comes in and they bring the gurney, they can run them through a metal detector if they're unconscious. Unlike many locations in the conversation here is that there is the rigor of providing concealed weapons and going through the process. That does not happen in emergency rooms. And though we might think it's not the case in Wyoming, it is in fact the case. Just to give a sense of it, prior to the pandemic, the Wyoming Medical Center, and I know they don't specifically include in this bill, but had anywhere between 34 to 38,000 visits in the ER annually. So that's larger than some of our darling little communities in this country or in the state. So it is pretty significant. One of the also outcomes in communities, say, such as Torrington, that have penal institutions, they do have the fear of unintended consequences that relate to some of the things that go on there. So with your kind consideration, I could go into more detail, and I'd be more than happy to talk about the unintended consequences. A 12 by 12 room in an emergency room, the physician walks in. If they have to go around the side of the bed, it can be very disconcerting if someone comes in and has a gun. And we all know, I'd be happy to have all of you, if you've not spent some time in an emergency room, it is a very stressful spot. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And I just want to say one last thing. In the other states where they looked at hospitals and sought exemptions were unsuccessful, they didn't specifically ask for emergency rooms. That is the most tense spot in a hospital.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you,
Shikich.
Madam Chair.
Questions?
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Welcome. I think we have the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Greetings. You heard the Stark alarm there, so I'll got you going. Please introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you. I had to put my glasses on to see if my microphone was on. Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, David Fraser, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Here in opposition to the bill, not in opposition to the Second Amendment. Our opposition to the bill is as may not surprise you, narrowly focused on the fact that it's a local preemption. We, at this time, local governing bodies, city councils in my case, have the opportunity to make those decisions, and we think they should be able to make those decisions in their community. We're completely Switzerland as in terms of what decision they make locally. If they want to have a policy that they don't allow guns in council meetings, we support that. If they want to have a policy that you're not allowed into the council meeting unless you have a gun, we believe that that's the right to do locally, and in fact, if they, again, just very briefly, we just believe that these decisions to be made locally. I'll indicate as a side note that I'm married to a teacher, so I have my opinions about what should be going on school campuses, but again, I believe that the local school board should be able to weigh out those issues and make decisions that are applicable to their specific schools. With that, I would certainly take any questions. Again, we support, and in fact, as a side note, I exercise my own Second Amendment rights, but again, we believe that this should be a local decision. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Questions for Mr. Fraser? All right, seeing none, thank you. We're going to go to next up in the room, if you could come forward. And then Mr. Birkeland out there in remote, you'll be next after the speaker here live. Welcome, Ms. Taylor, if you would introduce yourself to the committee.
Sorry for that. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Erin Taylor. I represent the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. So you did hear from President Devine in Casper College, but I think it's important for you to recognize that I represent all 49 trustees for each of the 7 community colleges. This is a bill that, again, we're not opposed to the Second Amendment, of course, but the ability to make these decisions locally that, like you did hear from President Devine, these institutions are complex. They serve our communities in many different ways. Aside from the programming for all sorts of different students of all ages, they also have, all 7 institutions have residence halls. These are currently areas that are gun-free zones, and we prefer that they continue to stay that way. They have labs with highly explosive materials involved, things like that, daycare centers, lots of public events, and all of the institutions do have a process where if you do bring in a firearm on the campus, that there is a process to communicate that with the safety and security personnel, register it, things like that. But we just wanted to express to the committee that this is of really great importance to the trustees and something that they feel really important for you to recognize that they are opposed to this bill. So thank you for that, Madam Chairman. That's all I have for you.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Appreciate hearing from you. Questions for Ms. Taylor? All right, Mr. Birkeland, if you would start your camera, please. Welcome, Mr. Birkeland. It's good to see you again. And you're on a timer and we're down to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm Bruce Birkeland. I'm with the Wyoming Youth Service Association. WYSA has programs that for youth and families. They include the child advocacy centers where kids are at risk of abuse or neglect or have been. We have crisis shelters, group homes, residential treatment programs. Many of our clients are court referred. We work with families, have a variety of issues, but involve things like abuse and neglect, domestic violence, substance abuse. So frequently when we start working with people, there are angry people and happy people. We would like to be able to make those decisions of whether or not people can carry firearms. That's a high risk situation, particularly at the start of therapy. All of our agencies are private nonprofit, but some of the agencies are in city-owned or county-owned buildings or property, and we have concerns of whether or not we would be able to, under those conditions, restrict who can carry or not, and for those facilities. So it's more a question of how that applies to those particular facilities. We also have a BOCES CBRV residential school, and BOCES kind of fits into, not sure if that's private or public in terms of the schools.
All right, thank you, Mr. Birkeland. So tips and tricks for members who are testifying in front of the committee, it'd be helpful and clarify your testimony. And I know it's hard, but if you support or oppose the bill, and if you communicate that clearly at the beginning of your testimony, that can be very helpful to the committee in understanding where you or your constituency may fall. So I am assuming you are question mark on the bill, Mr. Birkeland, as a result of the perceived ambiguities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Birkeland. With that, anyone else in the room? Please come forward.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brian Farmer from Wyoming School Boards Association, speaking in opposition to the bill. We have a really good law on the books right now. It's even referenced in this bill that controls for what happens in schools. Prefer that you keep it the same. What this would do is create an inequity now where you would have members of the staff regulated by local decisions, members of the public without that same regulation. So what that leads to is an imbalance and potential safety or security concerns within the schools. Right now, we have a really good system, allows for local control, ask that you keep it that same way.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. Questions for Mr. Farmer? All right, appreciate hearing from you. Next up in the room, and then we'll go to Kathleen Peterson, who is online.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Josh Hannes with the Wyoming Hospital Association. I won't repeat much of what Ms. Schickish already described about hospitals. I'll just add that hospitals are meant to be places of healing. We would like our facilities to continue to create those environments in the best way that they know how. Some of our members and folks that work in hospitals have been involved in active shooting incidents in healthcare facilities. That to some extent informs their views on how they manage that. We'd like to at least remain to be able to manage the whole facility, but at the very least, places like the emergency room, delivery rooms, for example. We would strongly encourage you to consider that as you move this forward, and I would stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hannes. Questions for Mr. Hannes? All right, seeing none. Ms. Peterson. Welcome, Ms. Peterson. Again, just a reminder to introduce yourself and state whether or not you support or oppose to the bill, and you are on a timer and limited to 2 minutes.
Good morning, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I rise in opposition to this bill. I have been following a bill like this for many years in different formats, as many of you in the room have. And I can't remember, it was like a couple of years ago, there was much debate about whether these decisions should be made at the state level or whether they should be made at the local level. And I think we ended up saying, yes, those decisions should be made at the local level, which it sounds like they are handling very well at the local level. I just hearken back to days of sitting on the high school bleachers, watching basketball games, football games, high tensions, arguments breaking out. One instance where a school from another state came up and played our schools. There was an altercation after the game. You add guns into that mix, and it sounds like this bill is going to force the local schools and city council meetings to allow guns in, whether they want them or not. And so add guns to a high emotion sports events, I don't think is a good mix, and I yield the floor.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. We appreciate hearing from you. Questions for Ms. Peterson? All right, seeing none, we will go to Mr. Thornell, who is also online. Mr. Thornell, welcome. If you'd start your camera and your audio. And anyone else in the room that would like to speak, if you would like to come forward and just have a seat up here so you're ready to go. Is there anyone else in the room? All right, Mr. Thornell, please.
Thank you. My name is Tim Thornell, President and CEO of Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, here representing uniquely our hospital to speak in opposition of the bill as written. I just want to make 2 points towards that end. At CRMC, for example, we have our own security force 24/7, and they are capable of carrying both less than lethal and regular firearms. And so we are very capable of protecting our staff and anyone in our facility. Second, hospitals are a unique environment, different than virtually any other environment out there. Most people coming to the hospital, whether as patients or as visitors, are here under a stressful situation, and to compound stressful situations with having to make a more than difficult decision about whether or not to use a firearm just complicates matters that much more severely. And again, in compilation with the fact that we have a very robust security force that can maintain safety of everyone here, we'll stand in opposition to it as written.
Mr. Thornell, thank you so much for being here. Questions for the CEO? All right, seeing none, we appreciate your feedback. All right, is there anyone else in the room live that would like to testify on this bill? If you don't stand up now or raise your hand, you will be prevented from testifying. So, all right, Ms. Cook in the waiting room, and then we've had more people decide they wanted to join, and so it's kind of made the planning of the meeting a little difficult. Ms. Cook, if you would go ahead and start your video, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and the distinguished committee members for allowing me to testify today in opposition to Senate File 67. My name is Barb Cook, wife of an Air Force vet, mom of 3 adult children, and grandma of 3, and a retired teacher. In my 21-year career of teaching, I was tasked with the job of walking children through many different types of drills so that they and I would be prepared for unexpected events. Initially, it was only fire drills, and this morphed into a series of other type of drills, intruder inside the building and intruder outside of the building. The goal of these drills was, in the rare event if any of these things should happen, we'd be prepared and to act and to do something safe, rational, and life-saving. I believe that we all want to make sure that schools are safe environments for learning, but Senate File 67 will not bring us closer to that goal. We know that access to a firearm triples the risk of death by suicide and doubles the risk of death by homicide. Clearly, the research indicates that introducing more guns to our school would diminish the safety of our students and teachers. I worked in one of the best small schools in Laramie County School District #1. We had wonderful clientele. However, there was never a shortage of challenging parents and grandparents frustrated with the administration, teachers, or even other children. It's important that potential disagreements be resolved peacefully and without risk of escalation. Injecting hidden, loaded firearms into these situations is reckless and could have terrible consequences. Schools must be a safe haven for learning. One of the most important jobs I had as a teacher was to keep children safe. As an educator, mom of 2 educators, and grandma of 2 school-aged children, I want children and teachers and staff safe, not in danger. Please defeat this bill. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is a humanitarian issue. Thank you for allowing me to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. We appreciate your testimony today. And now we have Dr. Schaefer, who will be our last speaker, who also has 2 minutes. Welcome, Dr. Schaefer. If you would start your camera, introduce yourself to the committee, and let us know your thoughts on the bill.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Joe Schaefer, I'm the president of Laramie County Community College, standing in opposition to the bill. I know that the issue before you really is trying to determine the balance between the constitutional rights of individuals and the state's interests. Our constitutional rights are not without limitations, Madam Chair. You've limited my constitutional right to free speech to 2 minutes this morning, and appropriately so. So one of the things you have to decide and determine on this is really the rights of an individual versus the state's interest in educating our citizenry. We're here to educate and do the state's work at a time when I would say is incredibly important for the state. Adding concealed carry weapons onto a campus environment and educational setting is going to add additional complexity and hinder our ability to carry out that work of the states. To what level, to what extent, I cannot tell you, but as a good comparison, you can look at the pandemic we're in right now. We cannot see who has COVID-19 or who does not, just like we can't see who would conceal carry or who would not. And yet it impacts our ability to navigate the educational process and really do the work of the states. The last thing, Madam Chair, I'll say is that we do have a mechanism to allow concealed carry on campus. In statute already, somebody with a concealed carry permit can request that of our campus safety officer or the campus administration to allow them to carry on campus. So with that, again, in opposition, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Questions for Dr. Schaefer? Appreciate that. Dr. Schaefer, are there students on campus who have those approvals from the college?
Madam Chair, not at this time, but we have approved them in the past.
Thank you, Dr. Schaefer. All right, appreciate hearing from you. With that, public comment is closed. Committee, back to you. Moved by Senator Cost, seconded by Senator Cooper. Committee members, we are short on time, so I will ask you to refrain from any speeches. But as you know, with good jest. So very, very brief. Senator Cole would like to share with us the statutory reference.
Under, as a junior attorney, not yet approved, under 68104, Section B, Romanet IV or 9, USC Section 922, parentheses G, or Wyoming Statute 68102 allows revocation of said concealed carry permit.
That is correct, Senator Kolb. Senator French, any comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, real quick. I'd like to thank everybody that testified. I know there's a lot of passion out there. As a parent of 2 children, grown children, and grandfather of 5 grandkids, I want, like, God forbid a shooter gets into a school. I would want somebody with a concealed to stop that intruder before they shoot 20 or 30 students. So I'm in support of this bill. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator French. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A lot of really good testimony here today, but I think a lot of the testimony we heard doesn't relate to the bill, or perhaps I'm misreading the bill. But as I see the bill, and that's what we're here to speak of, this is exceptions for state-issued concealed carry permits. It doesn't allow wholesale concealed carry into hospitals or schools or anywhere else. This is for state-issued permit holders only. I think that's a very important distinction. I think it's something that's been ignored by most of the testimony here today. And as such, with those restrictions, I speak for the bill, please.
Thank you, Senator Cooper. I have to share your assessment on the bill. I do think for those members of the public who testified against the bill, I do think there might be some misunderstandings or misconceptions associated with what the bill does and doesn't do, and understandings associated with the process involved with obtaining and receiving a concealed carry permit. And so just a point of clarification for those who are listening and care so deeply about this issue. So is there any amendments to the bill? All right, seeing none, roll call vote on the bill.
Senator Cooper.
Aye.
Senator French.
Aye.
Senator Kolb.
Aye.
Senator Cost.
No for now.
And Chairman Nethercott.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, Senate File 67 passes with 4 ayes and 1 no.
All right, thank you. With that, good senators, Majority Floor Leader Driscoll, it's 9:46, but I do want to give you a quick opportunity to explain the next bill, which is Senate File 155, limiting firearm seizure and regulation during emergencies.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Committee. Real quick one. This bill really is pretty simple because most of it's already in statute. So what this really does, it goes in and creates a couple deals. If you go to page 2 quickly on it, it adds permitting. The law that's already there has restrictions in lawful possession, transfer, sale, carrying, storage of. I've added permitting in there. The section that it went to on next one is Romanet or A on line 12, and we added other personal weapons. It's not just firearms, it goes to other personal weapons. So you drop down in the meat of the bill, lays on line 17 on, and this deals specifically with what's been going on now, and it's happened in some other cities and towns. It makes it where that limits the close or operating hours of person or entity involved in lawful selling, servicing any firearm, ammunition, or other personal weapon or other component thereof unless the closing or limitation of operating hours applies equally to all forms of commerce within the jurisdiction of the state, political subdivision, or government entity. Really simple. All it says is unilaterally, they can't come out and close a firearm store in a time that they're closing stuff down just because they want to. They're going to be treated the same as any other businesses out there without any deal. Go to page 3, last page of the bill. Close or limit the operating hours of any indoor or outdoor shooting range. On to line 5, place restrictions on quantity limitations or any other entity regarding the lawful sale, service, of any firearm, ammunition, or personal weapon, or any component thereof. On to line 10, suspend or revoke a permit to carry a concealed weapon issued pursuant unless the suspension or revocation is authorized and completed, back to the Wyoming statutes we just did. So what this really does is prevents an individual to go out, i.e. the governor mainly, and unilaterally close down firearms or ammunition related business. And sounds like you don't have to worry about it in Wyoming. We've talked about this a lot in the past. It's happened in many other states and cities already. This just comes in and says, look, you're not gonna be punitive on the firearms industry and the gun ranges and people. I think it's a great one to do. The example I use is 10 years ago, we passed a constitutional amendment on right to hunt, fish, and trap. I was told how stupid it is. Why are we even worried about this? Because we'll never have that in Wyoming. I find myself in my committee defending whether we can trap in Wyoming or not today. And these things do come. This bill's a good shot at making sure that we don't punitively go after something that at this point in our lives is kind of a given thought and a second part. So that would stand for questions.
All right, thank you, Majority Floor Leader. Questions for the Majority Floor Leader? All right, with that, we're going to go to public comment. I see we have Commissioner Malm with us. Commissioner Malm, if you would show your video. Committee members, it's 9:49. You still have 5 to 6 minutes of testimony left before I'll close this meeting down. Commissioner Malm, you're short on time here, so please be brief. Welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee. If you'd introduce yourself and share with us your thoughts.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you very much. Commissioner Gunnar Malm, Laramie County. I will be extremely brief for the good Majority Floor Leader. I just have a question or clarification in terms of the bill. Laramie County owns and operates a shooting range that is voter approved, but we set hours on that, obviously, and how this bill would work with that. We also sell ammunition when ammunition is available, and sometimes have had to place limits on the amount that we're able to sell. But it's kind of a unique situation where we are a business, but we are also a government entity. And so I'm curious how this bill would affect the ability of the commissioners in Laramie County to regulate hours and everything else within our facility. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I hope the Majority Floor Leader did hear that question. I think it's important to know Laramie County has a very unique situation where we have a publicly owned shooting range that also allows for the selling of ammunition. And so the Majority Floor Leader needs to look very carefully at the county's ability, whether or not there's a health order or not, to adjust its hours accordingly for whatever reason, or limit its ammunition sales for whatever reason, and think about the ramifications associated with that. Further public comment on this bill? There's no further public comment in the room. Is there any further public comment online? Raise your hand right now. All right, public comment is closed. Majority Floor Leader, back to you. Can you answer the question for the good commissioner and any final comments?
I'm reading it and he's caught me, Madam Chairman, caught me off guard. I did not anticipate that, and I'm trying to read my own bill to see exactly where it fits, because I can assure him, I would ask if we're going to do it to pass it out. I will fix it. That end, I absolutely. And this specifically is
Well, Majority Floor Leader, take your time and read the bill. They're not going to start without you.
Okay, well, we'll start with it's during emergencies. The bill is during emergencies, and it says they got to treat them the same. So my guess is, if I was interpreting the law, and I think that's what this is going to be, is if they're closing down other businesses within the area because of the pandemic or whatever it may be for an emergency, they've got the same right. The part of the question, and I will bring an amendment to the bill, limiting the sale of ammunition. I understand where they're at. When you have shortage of ammunition, there's a logical reason to ration it. And I think this bill, if there's a problem there, and there apparently is, I think, we'll be coming with an amendment on it as we get into committee of the whole and down the road. I'm going to use my good lawyer to help me do that, which just happens to be the chairman of this committee. But that's my promise should this bill come out. That is not any intent of mine. This is really set up to stop what's happened in specific in New York and Chicago, where a mayor comes out or a entity comes out and unilaterally shuts down shooting ranges or firearms because they don't like guns. And that's what this is trying to deal with. So with that, I'm sorry I can't fix it on the run. I got to have my lawyer do it for me.
All right, thank you. Majority Floor Leader. Final questions, Committee Senator Kolb.
Say move the bill.
Well, we'll close public comment first. Thank you, Majority Floor Leader. We've got time. The man in charge of starting the 10 o'clock is right here with us.
Oh, that's held on. Our floor leader.
All right, any discussion on the bill, committee? All right, roll call vote on the bill.
Get a second.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Chairman Nethercott.
Aye. And Judy, for the record, that was moved by Senator Kolb and seconded by Senator French.
Thank you.